meet with staff because I was out of town.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It is now 12:33, and our special board meeting of the trustees will begin at the May 2nd meeting at 12 p.m., which is our budget workshop. So I'm going to call it to order and immediately turn it over to Ms. Saavedra to go ahead and lead this conversation.
Yeah, thank you, President Velarde and trustees. Appreciate your time this afternoon as we continue working through our budget development process. Today, we've got members of the Budget and Finance Office in addition to members of our Budget Review Committee that will be part of this afternoon's presentation, which will include a three-year forecast, where we are in terms of our 2024 budget development, and then we'll end with a conversation about our maintenance tax note of the 2020 and refinancing that, which is separate and apart from the budget discussion. So with that, I'll hand it over to Ms. Aguirre so that she can share how we've worked to align our budget to our strategic priorities and our strategic blueprint going forward.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Board President, Superintendent Saavedra, Board of Trustees. This afternoon, I will be presenting to you an overview, as Ms. Saavedra mentioned, but I'd like to start a presentation, and I'm very pleased to present to you a couple of our Budget Review Committee members that participated in the five-month process of our review of our budget. So with this review, with this committee, what we did is we were able to and share with a lot of our district employees of various capacities how the district is run as far as how we generate revenue and how we allocate our different expenditures to our budget. And this afternoon, we do have Marisela Huerta from, she's a logistics coordinator from facilities, Sarah Luna, an assistant principal at Silva Magnet, Natalia Stroback-Oronos, an evaluator with our ASAP department, and Maria Tuck, an athletic trainer from Jefferson, that will be presenting to you their perspective of our budget review committee. You want to come up?
Good afternoon, trustees and Superintendent Saavedra. My name is Marisela Huerta, and I am with Facilities and Construction. I work on furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and work on logistics with the district. What is the Budget Review Committee? When I got invited, I thought it was a mistake since my realm of work is in a complete different area than anything finance or accounting, but indeed it was not. It was the whole point of it. We are a large group of employees from every campus, every department within the district, and we were invited to attend these monthly meetings that began this past October with the goal to gather and formulate input on the 2023 and 2024 budget priorities. And our group met for a total of 5 meetings, and we had on average 60 employees present at every meeting. And, sorry, I lost my track here. This was the first complete cycle of this endeavor, and we had a really, really great representation of non-instructional staff from every corner of the district, central staff like myself, campus staff, attendance clerks, custodians, counselors, social workers, and that was just at my table that I was sitting at. So we were all over, every corner of the district was represented in this committee. And essentially, this was a massive coordination of all of our diversified operations coming together in a central location to discuss the budget. Thank you.
Good afternoon, board members and Superintendent Saavedra. I'm Maria Tuck, athletic trainer at Jefferson High School. What I thought was the most interesting about the Budget Review Committee, along with meeting these people from job positions throughout the district that some of us didn't even know existed. I'm an athletic trainer, which means I'm a healthcare provider. My focus is sports medicine for our student athletes. But to meet people, again, from all areas of the district, and bring in all everybody's different viewpoints, what they saw as revenue ideas and efficiencies and places where we could really help the district save money and make money. And we thought that was very important. It was eye-opening to many of us to learn how the budget actually works. The inability to move money from this area to this area because this is only for these bonds or this is only for that. And so that really helped us get a better understanding of, well, there's all this money, why can't we just use it this way? No, we had to work with these frameworks. And we thought that was actually a huge success for the committee to get that information out to these employees who could then get that information out to their campuses and their departments so that people would get a better understanding of it, how exactly the budget worked. And the ideas that came, because again, these people on these different areas had ideas that I've got this great idea where we didn't know. And so people who you wouldn't think would necessarily be involved in the budget per se, but they had these great ideas that we could put forth to others and to use that information to help the budget process.
Good afternoon, Board President, Superintendent Saavedra, Board of Trustees. My name is Sarah Luna, and I'm an assistant principal at Solo Magnet. What I'm going to talk about is our overview, what we went over. So the biggest thing, this is very eye-opening, like the other members have said. I thought it was a mistake as well. I was like, I don't think I'm supposed to be on this. It was very eye-opening to be able to talk to everybody, and it was also very eye-opening to go over the numbers, because I don't think any of us had an idea of the budget. I mean, it's $500 million. I mean, it's a lot of money. So the biggest thing a lot of us kept focusing back on the district's goals and initiatives was the whole child. So it's easy to say that we wanted to cut and we don't need this and we don't need that and we should just spend money on this, but when it comes down to it, everything is for the students. So what are we really doing with that money and what can we really afford to cut when we're talking about the students? So again, the budget being as large as it is and seeing how it was broken down was very eye-opening for myself and for all of the other members. And so a lot of the things we went over was identifying where our money was being spent this year and the last couple of years, where the money comes from. Obviously going back to attendance, which I think was eye-opening. I'm at a high school, so I know how important attendance is, but I think a lot of people didn't realize that if our attendance is low, then we're not getting that money in. I mean, that's the biggest thing. So that was very eye-opening for us. And so we went over some of the things that we thought maybe we could cut, and it was a lot of back and forth because I'm at a campus. The things I think we can cut, maybe people who are at central office think that's not appropriate. So a lot of that and a lot of revenue generating ideas. So not only bringing up attendance, but how else can we make sure that these kids are here and learning? Okay, so this was a huge eye opener for all of us, and it's a touchy subject. So I know that it's been talked about, but you know, it's a touchy subject. It was eye opening for us, the district comparison, how many students we have compared to other districts, and then how many campuses we have compared to other districts. So you guys are aware of this, I'm sure, we've all talked about it. So, you know, looking at us versus Isleta, we have barely more students than they do, but we have a lot more schools and a lot more employees, and because we have those schools, we need more employees. So it was a touchy subject, a lot of us went back and forth, a lot of us are at some of those smaller campuses. There were people who were saying, but my campus is important, you know, so it was a big discussion. And it was, again, I know it's hard and it's a very touchy subject and people have a lot of emotional ties to it, but this was something that we knew was a big opportunity possibly for our district, just looking compared to other districts that have similar amounts of students to us, but are not spending the same amount of money that we are spending.
Okay. Good afternoon, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Saavedra. My name is Natalia Ronos. I am an evaluator with the ASAP department here at Central Office. What I'll be presenting for you today are the cost savings that the Budget Committee came up with, as well as the revenue generating ideas that we discussed. And I wanted to make sure to tell you a little bit about the activity that we did. Before we started these discussions, we asked the BEFN department to provide some amounts of the different things and how we spend money that we can actually move. And so based on those discussions, we came up with the cost savings that you have on your screen. And I think when we discussed the cost savings, the conversations were very contentious in our tables. Everyone felt very strongly, and I think I would be doing a disservice to the committee if I didn't say that these were conversation starters, not really suggestions. We just, these were conversations that we had, and we're not recommending that these are cuts. Just kind of things to look at. And if you look at the next slide, revenue generating ideas, these were much happier conversations. We were all, these were very straightforward, as my peers were mentioning before me. These centered around attendance, and that doesn't just affect funding. We want kids to be in school every day because it's good for them. We also talked about customer service and how whenever you go to any office or any campus, you should feel welcome as a staff member, as a parent, as a student. We talked about the truancy program and might we be able to improve attendance that way, marketing and parent involvement, and a really cool idea that came up here was the idea of a freshman transition, because we want to increase attendance in our high schools, and might we do something as they come to us for the very first time so that they're excited about attending high school. And so we're going to share a little bit about what we learned. I thought this was a really cool idea. I didn't think it was a mistake to be there. But as I was sharing things with our departments, and especially with the campus departments and the clerks and crossing guards, we come with preconceived notions based on the jobs that we do. I'm used to seeing budgets as, GT is funded for this much and this is what we do with it. And it was eye-opening to see that perspective from the campus, especially when we got into the testy stuff of cost-saving measures and ideas that I had, get rid of this one or have it there. And then hearing those perspectives and hearing absolutely not, this would absolutely not fly, that was eye-opening. I thought it was a very cool process, a very neat process to have us have that discussion and understand how little money we have to play with in the budget. And so I hope we can continue to do this and different people from different departments continue to experience this.
And just like everyone was saying, this was a huge eye-opener for myself. I'm used to be given a budget for the projects I work on and do everything I can to stay within and under that budget, because no one likes a change order. So to see, I didn't really know much about the district budget, what it's comprised of, or how it works. So in our early sessions, it was very educational. It's almost like an HR onboarding session where we're really given the numbers and the facts on the budget. So it was very, very eye-opening, and it was great to interact with campus staff, because I'm not on campus, and what the work that I do on campus, it's mostly when the campus is empty and there's no one there, so I don't get to interact. So being able to have that interaction and feedback with them was fantastic. And one of our sessions, we had some time to discuss the district's mission statement, vision, core beliefs. So it felt important that we were able to provide the input to move for the budget, to allocate funds to move in that direction of those beliefs, of that mission statement, of that vision. So we were working on the budget with a direction. So that felt really, really important to me. So I had a really great time attending all of them. And also as a bonus takeaway for me, because I knew attendance mattered, of course attendance matters, but I didn't know that it mattered to the tune of millions of dollars. So for my role, I'm not just replacing old furniture or replacing chairs. I'm creating inviting environments for these students. And if they're comfortable and if they feel good about the space that they're in, hopefully they'll want to come. Thank you.
And basically to reiterate everything that she said, we had some amazing discussions. I enjoyed every minute of it. I'm a former math teacher, so I like numbers anyways, but I thought it was very eye-opening. Me being on a campus, like I said, there's things that I thought, well, that's not important. Or in discussions that we had, well, like, why can't we do this with graduation or do this? And we were able to give a student perspective that some people who don't work with students on a daily basis weren't able to give. So I think it was very eye-opening. I hope that if it happens again next year, I would invite you all to go because I think it was a good experience. I think it was an amazing experience for everybody.
Good.
We have, she's,
Okay, we're done.
Finish it up, finish it up.
If you'd like to make another comment, otherwise,
Just say, again, this was a wonderful idea. It really was. And the different perspectives that the employees had, the ideas that some of these employees had, ideas of what to do with our empty schools, what to do with, future movement of schools, simple things, purchasing, the leases, these things that no one knows. I thought it was just a really great experience. And we hope that next year, even if it's a smaller committee, that we can get into more detail to really hit some of these maybe kind of line item stuff. And I think these employees would really surprise people on what we can think of. Thank you all so much.
well, thank you. Let's give them a round of applause. So what I'd like to share is just, this is the second year that we've had the Budget Review Committee. And as I shared, coming into my role as a superintendent in El Paso ISD, we are committed to a high level of transparency. We are committed to working alongside our employees to make critical decisions that are going to continue to further the future that we want for this school district. So the Budget Review Committee is one way that we're doing that. We're creating an awareness, educating our employees. We work also very closely with the Teacher Advisory Council. We also work very closely with our principals when we meet with them in a principals meeting. And we're constantly creating a level of awareness, creating and educating our employees. And, we're all on the same team. We have to solve these problems together. And it's important for us to bring in a number of different perspectives as we're making very tough decisions about the budget and bringing you recommendations that we can all support and that we know will be important to realize the future that we've charted with our strategic blueprint. So thank you so much for your involvement. We'll continue to work with this committee, and it is something that will remain year over year. We may end up having subcommittees from a larger committee so that we can dig in a little deeper as we go forward. But I think that we're on the right track in terms of that culture of accountability, that culture of transparency that we're constantly striving for.
thank you, ladies.
Thank you very much, everybody. That was a great presentation.
So if we move on to the next item on our agenda, we will be reviewing our 3-year financial forecast. And so, as we've shared in the past with you, running financial forecasts help us in the decision-making process. It helps us plan in the future and also to identify any critical areas of concern that we need to be aware of before we go and jump into new initiatives. So what you have in the slide in front of you is on the left side is the financial forecast that was presented to you last June as we were preparing and finalizing our budget for the current year that we're living in. In that area, in that forecast, you're seeing that in fiscal year 24, we were projecting a $3.7 million deficit. And then in fiscal year 25, we were looking at a $29.5 million deficit. When the forecast was presented, we also presented to you, we also shared that the deficits were based on an approach of no changes to our current budget, that everything was going to stay as it was currently at the point in time that we were sharing with you, which is not an actual reality that we live in. There are many changes that transpired throughout the year, but I think when I compare it to the forecast that you have on the right side, and just so that you can actually, especially our audience, so that they can see the forecast. It's not much bigger. What you see on the current year forecast is a presentation of the current year budget. The first column is current year budget, fiscal year 23. then the proposed budget fiscal year '24, and then what we are projecting for fiscal year '25 and '26. I have to share with you that when we presented the forecast last year, when compared to fiscal year '23, this year, there was not, the board adopted a 7% increase on salaries that was not presented at the time last June. So the expenses that you see in current fiscal year '23 are higher because of that fact. Our property values came in significantly higher than we were anticipating because the taxes are finalized in July, at the end of July, and we adopted our budget in June. As we're looking at our proposed budget for fiscal year '24, we are currently in a legislative session, as you are aware, and so there are many conversations going on about how school districts are funded. So with that said, right now, we're anticipating or they're projecting some type of change or movement to how they fund the school districts. So when you see fiscal year '24 revenue which is the second column, you can see in the revenue, our local revenue is increasing based on property valuations at a higher level. You can see that our state revenue is significantly higher, and that's with a projection of an increase to the basic allotment by $90 from $61.60 to $62.50. We're also in the efforts, as we discussed, the serious deficits that we were projecting in last year's forecast. We knew we had to take action to ensure that we do not adopt a budget with a deficit. As the BRC committee members shared, they shared and they were very surprised when we see how we compare to our neighboring school districts. So one of the things that we shared with you last year was that we were gonna look at our current staffing and identify areas of efficiency that we could reduce, which we did. We identified central office vacant positions and we closed them. We did identify other opportunities through athletics, through staffing approaches that would also help us in that process. So we did identify areas where we reduced our current budget. But all that to say, then, on the contrary, we also said, how are we going to improve our enrollment? Because every year I have come to you sharing that our enrollment is decreasing. So we have been busy working this year to how do we identify areas of opportunity. So what have we done? We're opening early childhood centered programs that will attract more young children to our campuses. So through the Montessori program and our expansion of pre-K3 section classrooms, that is also generating additional revenue for our state when you see the state revenue. We are also anticipating, like I said, it increases through the House bills. And then we are increasing by 1%. It's a small move, but it's an important move of 1% to our ADA. When we calculate our enrollment ADA ratio, we increased it by 1% to increase that revenue there.
Now, I just want to comment on that. I mean, our goal was to really get to 94%, where we hover just under 92%. So we're building this budget with a 91%, which is, again, what she said, 1% over. And we've made some concerted efforts that we will continue to refine going forward. Our biggest win this year has been just to create a significant awareness, as you heard from our BRC, about the importance of attendance and how that draws in revenue. I think that there's been a significant awareness at the principal level in terms of the importance of monitoring attendance. We've built a dashboard so that our principals can track what their attendance is, and we've made concerted efforts to recognize those campuses, those classrooms, those teachers that are really pushing attendance and their students coming to school on a regular basis. So although you only see a 1% increase, we anticipate that we're going to be able to continue to work to refine that so that we can see additional increases going forward.
That's correct. When you see the federal revenue, there is a decrease there that you can observe, and that is because the ESSER program funding is also going to sunset in fiscal year '24. September of 2024. So having said that, our indirect cost rates that the district is generating from that funding will also be reducing it there. Under the expenditures, I'd like to wait for the budget snapshot to give you more of that detail on the expenditures. But if we focus towards the bottom of the page, you can see that when we're proposing our fiscal year 24 budget, we're requesting the use of fund balance to the level of 10.8 million. I do have a capital replacement plan overview towards the back of the presentation that we'll review so that I can give you detail there. And if you recall, we finalized our fiscal year 22 budget with 89, I believe it was 89.7 or 89.8 days of fund balance. Requesting the 10.8 million use of fund balance would be the equivalent of 7.3 days. So that would bring us down to the lower 80s versus the high 80s that we currently are standing. And that is not without considering how we will finish this fiscal year and what will increase in fund balance as we close out this year's budget. So when I finalize this, what we're sharing here is that in fiscal year 24, this 3-year forecast is reflecting $3 million excess revenue over expenses. Let me be very clear. Compensation is not considered in this projection. As we go through the presentation, I'll share those snapshots with you. In fiscal year 25, if nothing were to change, we would see a 6.6 deficit, and then in fiscal year 26, a $12.3 million deficit. It's also important to note that in fiscal year 26, it would be the initiation of another legislative session. With every legislative session, there is also consideration and discussion on how they're funding our school districts. So that would also be another shift to how our revenue would be impacted as we move through the years.
The one thing I also want to state is that, again, the numbers that the Business and Finance Office has baked into this forecast are just the basic numbers from the basic allotment. And you know, we've talked to TASBO and a lot of the other organizations that we're part of, and House Bill 100 is the House bill that seems to be the House bill that's gaining the most traction, and on the Senate side as well. And so we feel confident that the basic allotment, at the very least, will be raised, you know, by the amounts that Martha shared. This does not include any weighted funding that might come as a result of special populations. It also does not include some of the changes that the state or the legislature is making in terms of some funding pots may be funded by enrollment versus ADA, which may draw, you know, additional revenue for us. And none of those nuances are baked in. We're just using the flat basic, you know, allotment where we feel confident that that's where the legislature is going. The other thing that's not baked in here is the security, you know, the safety and security allotment that is still under review, and they're looking at, you know, anywhere from $10 to $100, you know, raising per student allotment, raising that, and they haven't, you know, landed, you know, on that one yet either. So I just wanted to be clear. It's always challenging for us to make decisions when the legislature is still in session, but we're providing you the information based on the direction that we think the legislature is going from a very conservative perspective.
So if we move on to the next. If we move on to the actual update on the budget development, I want to share and take you back a year ago when we were visiting all our campuses and conducting the hopes and dreams.
Yeah, on this, I'm just really thankful for this approach. I think it's the first time that your narrative is very like, oh, this is what's possible, and it's not this like cloudy day and it's raining on us because we have declining enrollment, and you were like, we actually did stuff about it, and now last year it came to you, and if we didn't do anything in 3 years, we were at a $29 million deficit, and now we're looking at this and it's at a $12 million in the next few years if we do nothing about it, right? So I think it adds the credibility to your team, not that it didn't have credibility, but in the sense of we're not gonna be satisfied with the $29 million and then now you're coming with the 12 million in the next few years. It's like, okay, you said that, you did the work, and then now it's like, let's not let the $12 million happen, and it's a lot less than what was there. So I'm just really happy about that part. One question that I did have, I start thinking about the economy right now and stuff that's happening when we're borrowing money and interest rates going up, and what does that look like in all of this? Have we considered that?
So I can share that when you're looking at the proposed budgets from our various departments, you do see that impact because there is increases in costs of goods and services. So everybody is feeling it. We see it in utilities. We see it in even in our property insurance, we're seeing increases. And every aspect of our operation is feeling it. We are seeing increases to some of our investments because the interest rates have gone up. But I think when I do have our financial advisors here present, so when we get to the item related to our financing, I think she can share a little more detail as far as what is foreseen as far as the interest and
Loan rating, et cetera, all of that. Okay. Yeah.
So as we move on to the next section under the budget development update, I'd like to share that, a year ago, we were doing hopes and dreams. We were reviewing, we were visiting campuses and listening to our constituents, right? Ms. Ayavedra established this program initiative to understand what's out there. What do our employees feel? What do our community or stakeholders feel? What do our employees feel? So through those hopes and dreams, we identified the needs of our district, the wants of our district, and then we developed what we call now our district strategic blueprint. Sorry, technical difficulties.
Yeah, you got board approval to do that, okay?
Can we add that to the budget, please? It never works.
So through that development of our needs assessment, what we often refer to as, instead of planning for a budget, we actually now this year are coming to plan for the program. We're budgeting for our plan, which is our strategic blueprint. And so when we look at all that we've allocated in our
You might just have somebody stand.
When you look at our budget snapshot, and I gave you much of the details as far as how our revenue was created or developed for this year, I have to share that when you look at the expenditures, the largest increase that we have there is due to the compensation increase the board passed last June with a compensation of that 7% in that tiered level approach. There are, as you asked and I shared a little bit about, there are increases to cost of goods and services. So our departments have really had to prioritize ensuring that they meet or align to the strategic blueprint, but prioritize what it is that they're proposing in their plan. I can share that we're still reviewing because we are not at the level of the budget expenses that we need to be to feel certain that we're going to move forward. But at this point right now, you can see the various differences. In Function 11, we did, because we revised the approach to how we schedule at the middle school level, that required us to allocate additional staffing supports in that level, and they're in the form of teachers. We refer to them as supplemental instructional supports. We also, with the athletic staffing changes that we approved or we implemented at the high school level, we also incorporated additional supports there. Our one-to-one devices, that's a large expenditure when you look at Function 11, which is probably one of the highest increases that you can see throughout those functions. We aligned in Function 13 some of our campus teaching coaches, so that because with the creation of our instructional interventionists, sorry, I apologize. With the creation of our instructional interventionists that are focused more to working with the students, our campus teaching coaches are now going to be more tiered to working with our teachers to support them in the instruction implementation. Like I mentioned earlier, we do have an increase in utility costs at about $3 million. We do have increases to our insurance. We do have allocations with our facilities and our maintenance groups as well, because we are focused on, there's a lot of needs in our facilities, and everybody is aware of them. I mean, we know, we can visit our campuses and realize there's a lot of needs out there. We can't approach them all, but there is a plan in place to focus on that. You'll notice that we have a larger audience today because we have department leads here that if for any reason there's a question that you might have or want to ask, they can answer the question at this point. Again, the legislative session is not done at this point, but we are hoping that they finalize with a better approach or plan than what they currently have. They currently are proposing that the only thing that's on the table that's of significance is a $90 increase to our basic allotment, with smaller increases through our different programs. It is also important to realize that that requirement will come with an increase of, any increase in state revenue will require a 50% use of that money for salaries, employee salaries. Of that 50% increase of state revenue, then they'll also require that 75% of the 50% is earmarked for teachers, counselors, librarians, and nurses. And so that is something that, you know, we keep in mind as we start working with actual compensation increases. 75% of the 50% of the new money.
So, yeah, and what we know is gonna come from the legislature is that any increase in the basic allotment, in all likelihood, 50% of that increase is gonna need to go towards compensation of our employees. 75% of that must be for teachers and the other job roles that she mentioned, librarians, counselors.
So that's anticipated in this, what you had just described?
Well, when we get to the compensation conversation, we'll share with you what that looks like in terms of what that does to the forecast.
So when we move on to the next slide, you have the budget snapshot related to the food service. I think I'm just going to stand over. So when you see the food service budget snapshot, we're projecting a total of $34 million in revenue related to the food and nutrition program, with expenditures aligned to the same level. I must share that our food and nutrition program is very healthy. They have a very healthy fund balance, almost to the level that it's unhealthy. The CDA requires that we only carry a 3-month fund balance. So with that in mind, we have to spend down anything above that area. So we have focused on expending or utilizing maybe higher, I don't want to say better quality, I want to say higher tier food items because we can't afford it. I said, bring on the ribeye steak, right? So we are focusing on higher tiered level food items. We have also invested in outdoor seating at the high school levels to give students options in where they have their lunch. We are, through the process of a committee that they refer to as the YAC, the Youth Advisory Council, they have tried out different types of meals that will, and then gathered input from the students so that they can purchase these items for the following year. We are also investing in biodegradable paper products for the kids' meal serving, so that's also environmental friendly. And I have to regress one, I apologize. I skipped the capital replacement plan. So this is the capital replacement plan. This is aligned to the general operating budget. And so I have it categorized by departments. And so when you look at the fine arts, their focus, their total request is, that is currently being considered is $770,000. And I have to share, this 10.8 is what we're requesting to use out of fund balance. And I'm saying that because they're listening to me and they're probably saying, wait a minute, I asked for $1 million. So there are some things that we may have already considered in the operating budget, but this is what we're looking at through the capital replacement plan with the use of fund balance, okay? And so when you see this, we're doing the higher end or higher cost large pieces of instruments or equipment, uniforms for the different groups, choir risers, and then general instrument replacements. When we look at athletics, he's also generalized or summarized them with equipment and supplies that are below 5,000 and then above 5,000. And the allocation there is 505,000 with high school uniforms also, a rotation plan there in place. Library Learning Resources has a collection to maintain the library collection, and they have an allocation there for that amount of 325,000. In technology, it's $6.5 million for the one-to-one devices at the various levels you can see there. The pre-K students, the 3rd grade, and the 8th graders. In transportation, there is an established vehicle replacement plan that he has in place. And so on this location, the plan would be to replace buses and 1 vehicle. Under custodial services, we have run-on auto scrubbers that we have been purchasing over the years. Of course, this is efficiencies to our custodial staff as they approach how they clean our campus. And then our facilities and constructions, I generalized it by capital projects, but the focus, and again, I mentioned to you, when you look at the budget, there's a $10 million allocation. Of that request, only 257 is what I would be bringing out of the use of fund balance, but this would be aligned to roofing. We had roofing, and then we had gym floors, I believe is, here it is. We had roofing and gym floors would be some of the larger cost items that are listed in that. And then under the maintenance, we have some equipment, large cost equipment, and then also $800,000 allocated for elevator rehabilitation, and then digitizing of our energy management and control system. And this is the equivalent of the 10.8 that we would be proposing for use of fund balance. And go on to the third fund that the board officially adopts, is the debt service fund. So what we have here is that we're proposing our debt service fund to be adopted at the level of $58 million. Keep in mind that the INS, what we refer to as the INS fund, is used to pay for our debt. And so this is the level of funds, the revenue needed based on our INS tax rate aligned to what we need to cover for our debt, the district's debt. There will be an excess of $900,000 that will cover any fees that may come in a little higher or lower throughout the year. And we move on to compensation if there are no questions on the snapshot.
I'm just thinking about the healthy budget and food nutrition. And I'm thinking a lot of the families that we serve are food insecure, so if we have such a good budget, are we thinking about like almost taking an equitable approach to where we have this funding to know that we're better serving the families and doing other things? I know the money is very comes with a lot of restrictions, but like something that comes to mind is a food pantry if it's possible, or just other things like that. I know we're doing after-school programs for giving food to kids and stuff like that, but more things that are there. If you're getting other food, is it healthier, or are we doing more with like maybe local partnerships? I also think about like a cool grocery store concept that is a nonprofit, or, you know, just things like that. If there's not restriction on certain funds, can we do stuff like that?
So we are working with, and you know, I don't have the document in front of me. We are working with some locally based organizations to also support some of our food pantries to assist with any foods that may not have been consumed and can be shared with. We do have, for every campus has a supper program so that our kids do come and can have a meal before they actually go home. They serve up, I think it's about an hour after the close of the school day. And so we do have that. I guess the benefit that we currently have in our district is that we have all but about 9 campuses, I think in total, that are CEP provisional campuses, which means that any student can eat for free. There's no restriction. They don't have to submit their application. They just need, because many times our students don't want to submit that because they don't want to feel ashamed. Well, when they're a CEP campus, nobody supplies that application, so they eat for free. But we are working, and I could probably provide you more of a detail on it through a board update.
Yeah, I just think of like Desert Spoon, and they're doing some really cool stuff. Just thinking about that and kind of being innovative, I hate that word, but taking that approach to using, if this is such a healthy fund balance, like let's do some cool stuff with it within the restrictions that we have.
Yes.
When we talk about the sweep at the end of the year, you're mentioning the Brent doesn't count for the $9 million that we recaptured.
Correct.
What's the average that we usually recapture? Is there a kind of sporadic, one spectrum to the other?
You know, it varies. I know that obviously when we were through the pandemic, that's when we generated the largest savings because we weren't operating on a normal basis. But I could say, I want to say that it would be fair to assume that we could probably recapture about anywhere between 3 to 5, and I'm being very conservative. I can do the research and provide you that update, but I don't want to speak out of line right now.
3 to 5 million or 3 to 5 days?
Million.
Million, so about,
And a day is 1.5 million.
okay.
So about between 2 to 3 days of fund balance.
And then
And that's being conservative.
is there a reason why we're spending $10.8 million from the capital replacement when we don't need 10.8? Because there's a $3 million surplus at the end of it, when you take that into consideration?
So, because this one has no, we did incorporate the basic allotment increase, and knowing that we may have to consider some type of compensation increase aligned to that condition that the state gives us. Right now, that's why we just drafted it.
This is the just in case.
Correct.
Okay.
So if we move on,
Sorry, one more question.
Okay.
On the projection, when we get towards 25, 26, and so on and so forth, the capital replacement stays at $11 million plus. Is the idea to take $10 million from the general fund year after year to pay that down and then bring the budget down by 10 million, or is it going to be?
so in the past, we have used about 5 million of fund balance for capital replacement. Again, because we have allocated more to facilities and areas where we normally don't allocate as high a level. We identified the use of fund balance at 10 level, and realizing that we have right now the 89 and have a little bit of leverage there. However, we would always, the determination on use of fund balance would always be dependent on where our fund balance level is in that particular year.
So we're not budgeting, thinking we're going to use fund balance for the
No.
next minute?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not a fixed number that we try to, use a fund balance. It's really based on need. And what are those one-time costs that could come out of fund balance that address a need, that gives us additional bandwidth in our operating budget to do, what we need to do to support, specific priorities and initiatives. So I wouldn't say that 10 million would be like we would say, oh, we're going to use 10 million because not necessarily, that's not, I think it's really based on what the specific need is. Martha, I do have a question really quick.
Yes.
I know that when we think about our calendar, our school calendar next year, the following year, we did hit that 180-day mark that initiates additional funding for that. Is that baked into these numbers as well?
Yes, it is. 1.9 million.
Okay, all right, just wanted to make sure. Thanks.
And then, this again, just back on that last point, but we did have that meeting where we talked about if we do win that Bliss grant, to redo it, that the fund balance would be one of the opportunities that we would look at, correct? Which
That would be one,
was it $12 million?
about 10 million.
$10 million?
11 million.
Okay, and that's still the plan as an opportunity, not
That's-
necessarily as we're planning, we're gonna use it, but as an opportunity is where we would look.
That could be an option.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
In regards to the food nutrition services, as I recall, during our hopes and dreams sessions, we had a lot of input regarding our food. And at that time, maybe Ms. Saavedra, you weren't, I mean, you were a little surprised that others spoke about that, but I'd like to see an increase in the quality, like you were mentioning, and maybe that could also be a factor for kids to want to come to our district, to know that we have better food, better quality food, a balanced meal other than, I mean, to have the four food components there every day so they can choose it. As we all know, not everybody likes to eat the same things, but they have choices, and I know they have their choices, but I would like to see a more focus on healthier foods. I mean, at all lunch periods, in the afternoons, so they know what it's like to have good quality food that have the four food components, so they know that when they come to school, those choices are there.
And I will share that they created what they refer to as a youth advisory council. That was students giving their input on the different sampling of meals. That was a determination, that helped them determine what kind of products they were going to purchase as they moved. And right now, they're currently in the process of ordering food for next year's meals, so that the menus. And so that was part of there's more intention in how they get input, because they do realize that, they are our customers. They are the end users that need to ensure that they're satisfied with it.
They've hosted several tasting events at several campuses across the district, and, had students not only taste food, that they are anticipating possibly, ordering, and they've given electronic feedback and written feedback on, throughout those tastings. So students have been involved in the process as we improve our food options, for kids. And so it's a work in progress, but we appreciate the feedback.
So as we move on our presentation, we move on to a compensation process update, and Ms. Cortez will open this discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Aguirre. Board President and Ms. Saavedra and board members, as Ms. Aguirre mentioned earlier, the compensation plan, the compensation is not included in the forecast at this time, and we know that legislation is not finalized. However, the work continues to work towards our end goal, and so what's important to note here is that or a reminder that the compensation process is really twofold. And so we'll continue working towards what that recommendation will look like, because we understand, regardless of our priorities and what we've looked at so far in terms of our strategic blueprint, we know that remaining competitive is always going to be important. So we just need to identify in what context we can do that. And that means that in addition to the cost comparison that's provided here, which is, again, just for information so that we can bring awareness to the cost associated with any type of recommendation. But in addition to that, what's important to maintain that competitive edge is to ensure that we're reviewing our pay system, to ensure that we're maintaining competitive salaries. And that's really also tying into our strategic blueprint in terms of
when we say destination district and taking care of the whole child, well, we need to make sure we have the right employees, right, to take care of our whole child. So it really does encompass both students and employees when we're talking or referencing destination district. And also the competitive salary, in order to do that, your pay structure is really important. So even when a raise is not implemented, which has happened in prior years, it's important to look at your pay grades and ensure that you're maintaining the competitive pay grade. And so that is, like I mentioned, the second part of the review, that the compensation team under Ms. Pirtle continues to do the work to look at the different pay grades and ensure that we are maintaining a competitive rate. So through the next board workshop, we should have more information on what those pay grade recommendations will look like. And then, of course, any legislative action will also help support any recommendation for a compensation plan. Mr. Acevedo?
No, I just have a little feedback. I really want to visualize the 75% of the 50% of the allotment. So if you could do those where we're getting that finance and like draw it up nicely, I would really appreciate that.
So for our next budget workshop, and again, we're, day by day, play by play, we're following, we get the emails and get notified that what changed, what is now more, what has been established as the next, on the bill, or what has been removed from the bill. So in June, at the June workshop, we will give you that breakdown of if they've come to a final decision there, what that breakdown would look like. So along the lines of the previous slide that you just shared, what we did here is a side-by-side forecast of what a compensation increase would look like. So you can see at the 0%, which is the slide similar to the one you saw a few pages up, that's the graph on the left. I'm sorry, the schedule on the left. Then on the right side, you can see where in fiscal year 24, we would offer a 3% increase of compensation across the board. Again, these are just scenarios. So the 3% increase you can see in fiscal year 24, which is the year we would propose that 3% increase, would result in the bottom line having a $9.6 million deficit. Now let me be very clear. We will never adopt a budget with a deficit. So we need to ensure that we would reduce in operations if that were the direction we were going to go. When we say we would reduce the department allocations in operations, then that means that any initiatives and our movement towards making sure that we address our levers would not be met at the same standard or level. And
So, I would share with you that between now and the budget adoption on June 20th, correct? There's still significant work to do with the budget to ensure that, we can bring you, a balance sheet, for this fiscal year. We're giving you the forecast should, there be consideration for the 3%. That 3% that you see there includes the allotment that the state is going to require us. So that includes the 2%, basically, that we're estimating that the raise in the basic allotment with the requirements that we just shared with the 50% and the 75% comes to about a 2% raise, right? Or a 2% compensation.
correct.
What you see there is an additional 1% if we considered a total of 3%, which again would still require us to do significant work on our budget so that we could provide a balance sheet.
I do have a question on this. I'm a big believer of this. So if we are looking, and obviously this is the 3%, is that applying across the board to all staff? Or
Yes.
is applying it just to those that are required to get the raise?
Across the board.
As I am an advocate that it's, all for one and one for all. And I understand that, the law sometimes doesn't always see it that way and gives certain occupations more privilege, but I think it's important that we as a district recognize that all employees are equally valued and that what is required of be given on one side, it has to be matched some way, somehow, for everybody. Because everybody in this district has a hugely important role, and their value is no less than anybody else's.
It does include everybody.
And does this budget also include that Department of Defense for Bliss program?
It's not included.
And this deficit, I mean, I know we're not gonna approve it without making a plan to make it work, but how would we come up with that, other than besides operations? Are we gonna use some of our
Well,
fund balance?
because we haven't spent or allocated that money yet, then that would be the plan. To go back to departments and say, you presented a budget with X amount, and we've got to review your budget because we've got to reduce it by X amount, so that we can get to a bottom line figure that we can present to the board, to present you a balanced budget. So that would be, the strategy that we use, because this money has not been allocated yet.
And so does that process then start with the department heads down?
Sure.
Or are you gonna utilize your committee? Yes.
So not the committee. I would then meet with all the department leads. Yes.
Because I didn't know how that process ever worked.
So there's significant work that we still have to do.
I just think about, you open this section with the 5 levers of the strategic plan, and I think what would be great to see is how this budget is addressing each of those levers. It makes me think of like what Myra did with the audit for next year. She was like, this is going through these different levers. And if we got, because I mean, this is our blueprint, it gives us a direction, right? And it's like, okay, $2 million for 1.2 or whatever it is, right? That would be really cool to see.
And we're working on that, to bring that to you specifically in the June budget, so that you can see the big picture. Here's all the work that we've done, here's where we've landed, and here's how all of our investments align to the strategic blueprint in amounts for each lever.
You stole our thunder.
Sorry. I was about to be like, I'm about to get you really annoyed with everything that I ask for every year.
That was our.
No, it's great that we're on the same page. No, that's
Next
great.
presentation.
Go to the calendar. Can you talk a little bit about our, for Patty, our hard to staff positions and positions where we have a high amount of turnover, or that we have a hard time filling. Can you just talk a little bit about that generally, whether it's teachers or bus drivers or any employees?
So the areas that we've really seen this year, then try to develop recoupment plans, have been our dual language positions, our sped positions, and in transportation, our drivers. So this year, for the sped positions, if you recall, we did ask or request from the board approval to provide a sign-on bonus for SLPs. We've gone out and working with UTEP to see if there's work we can do there for a pipeline. And with bus drivers, again, working with the department to identify also for the coming year, possibly bringing in option for a sign-on bonus as well. So that's really an area that has been very difficult, because what you've had is a competitive, pretty much a back and forth with the districts in terms of the starting pay. So right now, I believe we increased it, I think we came to you twice last year. And so now the highest pay is $20 an hour for bus drivers. So again, that's an area that will come back to you for this next year. But really, I think pay is one area. I think just it's an area where they have options, and we're just not seeing a lot of interest in that area. So I believe that we've looked at maybe also the Director of Transportation has considered maybe pipelines for that as well, for just entry level in terms of like high school students that might be interested in that type of job as just initial entry into the workforce. So that's an area that we're looking at. In terms of dual language, we actually have been working really hard to identify opportunities there. We actually have 5 teachers from Spain that will be starting with us for the following school year. We're looking at also enhancing our resident program. So we just signed on 17 residents for this upcoming school year. So I have to tell you that, Irma's team with the both, but definitely with working through the hires for the Spain teachers has really been very enlightening and just shows you that there's a lot of opportunity out there to really enhance that program. So again, just working through, what other options might be out there. But I think for this year, the team did some significant work to recruit in the area of dual language. And with SPED, I think really it is about maintaining competitive salaries. So we're looking at that for next year.
So, just real quick, as we think about all of the things to consider as we make, final recommendations to you all leading up to the June 20th meeting in terms of compensation, we want to be careful about putting all the eggs into the percentage increase. We want to balance that with, some of these other challenges that we might have and considering, stipend increases in certain areas. I would also share with you, we did a lot of work with, our coaching staff in terms of developing protocols, aligning hiring practices that, have been have created cost savings for us in our budget. So looking at, stipend, increases, in a number of different areas, coaches, possibly dual language, and other areas. So it's a multitude of of strategies that we're trying to use. But I did want to say that out loud. As we think about the recommendation that we want to make for the board tied to compensation, it's not only the percentage increase, but it's also these other compensation pieces that we want to make sure that we're attracting and we're able to secure and fill, vacancies. Dual language being a significant challenge because we really have to focus on developing the infrastructure to deliver on, our dual language programming at a high level of fidelity. And certification, we're finding, is a significant issue, for us. And so we've got to bridge that gap, not only with compensation, but also with recruitment efforts and pipeline efforts, that continue to help us whittle that down.
And that's kind of why I asked, I would love to see in the next session sort of a breakdown of where we feel we have a lot of these high need positions, high turnover, where other districts are possibly outpacing us in certain areas that are, preventing us from being people if we do get to hire them, just so that we have like a visual breakdown. Our assessing the needs of our emergent bilinguals and also of our SPED students is a huge part of our strategic plan. It's a huge part of our H93 outline. And so, just like Dr. Acevedo said, to have that aligned, I think will really help us ensure that whatever is at the table is really addressing the needs of our students. The other thing that sort of gets lost in this mix too, that I would love to see more of a visual and that I talk about quite a bit is how we are helping to staff some of our high need areas and our historically low performing schools, as we look at what TEA is doing in terms of just sort of, putting the hammer down on boards. I think we have that obligation to say this out loud, that we need to foresee a plan that we can, and this is the time to do that when we're in the middle of a budget cycle and we have an opportunity to appropriate some funds strategically to make sure that we're, closing that gap between the
And I think that we've definitely, you probably will see some phases into that. First one being that we talked earlier about the interventionist and looking at how to really truly staff based on need to support individual students. So I think that as we continue to work through collaboration with academics, with school leadership, I think that's been the key in identifying a lot of this improvement. We're working together to ensure that we're looking at it from the different perspectives. Academics has also been key in really working with HR to look at those areas of shortage to see what ideas can we come up with collectively to.
And I feel like I've seen sort of a blanket approach, at least in the last, as we go back the last couple of budget meetings, rewinding, it was more of a blanket, approach to that, just like you talked about with the interventionist. I feel like what visually I haven't seen is the targeted approach. So I would love to know how that, and for me, it's really more, I know we have an equity audit coming up, but I think there are things that we can strategize now, you know, whether it's with effective schools framework, you know, the lever two, or however you want to address it. But I don't think we necessarily need the audit to address some of the things, and we talk about those things all the time. And then the last question that I have is the mental health component of this. That also, I know, I can see here that we've got an increase in our social work services.
We have an increase.
Counseling and evaluation. Can you talk a little bit about how you're scaling that up to like our tier 3 supports, or a higher level of supports, in terms of like our social emotional learning? And maybe this is a question for downstream, but you know, some of those I think are high need areas, like having additional psychologists available for assistance, maybe another opportunity to bring in somebody to address some of those. I mean, I know we're just developing our tiered intervention structure for social emotional learning, but the higher tier is where I think
Tier 3, they're more critical.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
So the easy answer right now that I can give you is yes, we did focus on additional FTEs in social services that'll support our campuses with more, you know, so that our students have access. And now it goes, where before it was just focused and structured for elementary, now it goes throughout up to high school. And so the idea there would be that then additional supports that will then be communicated in, through our counseling department to support them. And I guess that's where we can get you additional information there.
I really just want to lift up the feedback that I get from students in the community, especially, well, and really at all ages, as you know, students are still struggling quite a bit with this fallout of the pandemic, but just generally. And so I do want to make sure that we're responsive. And I think that's a huge part, and it probably, you know, super would be a good place to address that. But again, specifically concerned about the critical tier intervention supports, tier 3 intervention supports.
So I've added that to pending list items so that we can provide you with more updates in terms of, you know, where we are with all supports, and then we'll emphasize, you know, any additional partnerships that we're engaging in that would support tier 3 students.
My question's basically almost along the lines of what Ms. Hanani was saying, but a little different. Where you had spoken in many occasions where you're wanting to do job reclassification or making sure that all positions are aligned with the market and such, for like speech pathologists, librarians, principals, counselors, and such. When would that be complete, or would it be complete maybe within this time frame, or when?
So we would have something coming to you at the next board workshop.
Meaning,
On June 8th, I believe is the next.
I mean, you already have all of those positions
Yes,
reclassified?
we've been working on it.
So by June, you would have somewhat of a good,
Yes, we would have a good assessment, and so not every position is actually, a change is implemented, but we do a cyclical review so that we allow within the budget, have some type of system that allows us to review classifications and provide any equity adjustments.
wow, that was a lot sooner than I expected, because I'd been hearing it, but I didn't know when we were gonna
Well,
ever.
yeah, for us to be able to recommend, we have to make adjustments to the salary schedule and incorporate that into whatever compensation increase that we would consider. So that's a natural part of the work that we would do leading up to budget development.
So maybe by then, yeah, we would be all in a good position to move forward, okay.
And what was it, June, by when?
For the goal would be that
So
it's
like
part
at our
of the
budget workshop.
compensation package.
Okay. Because I was like, June 20th is the final
Yes.
adoption, okay.
So, any more questions? If we move on to so the next item on the agenda is the calendar, and what you can see there is just our upcoming workshop. I will also share with you that we have provided you, or they're ready for your review. Every division, department booklet, which has got their organizational chart. It has their current year priorities, next year's priorities, current year highlights, and their proposed budget. When I say it's in draft form, it's because it's what they initially proposed. We've been massaging the budget, and so the numbers are always moving. But I had to capture a snapshot of it to give you some insight. We have it electronically, and we also have it broken down into booklets by division to include the campuses. I'll share these with Liz, and we can go from there on that. And then if we move on to the next item, I have here Ms. Maria Urbina from Hilltop Securities. She is our financial advisor. And I can just
So this is item D, maintenance tax note.
So as you are aware,
Martha, just real, this is separate and aside from the budget.
yes, it's separate from the budget, and you have a separate booklet that I shared with you. And it's related to a maintenance tax note, a financing requirement.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, for the record here, President Management, board members, Ms. Sayonara. My name is Maria Urbina with Hilltop Securities. And just to give you a little bit of background before I get the presentation going, so Hilltop Securities, we're a firm headquartered in Dallas, and we do have an office in El Paso. We've had an office over 20 years, and I've been here for 15 of those 20 years. I'm actually from El Paso and a product of EPISD, so I'm glad to be here today to talk about some financing options. So what does Hilltop Securities do? So Hilltop Securities, basically, we're municipal advisors, and so whenever the district is getting ready to fund projects, for example, back in 2016, you passed a bond election, we helped you issue the debt, okay? And so aside from that, we also monitor your debt to make sure that if there's any refinancing opportunities, that we take advantage, we present them to your staff, and then we move forward with presentations. So what are we here to do today? So we're going to talk about refinancing of your existing variable rate maintenance tax note that you issued back in 2020. So back in 2020, you needed some money for rehabilitation of internal facilities in the amount of roughly about $18 million. And so what we're here to do, when you issued it back in 2020, you issued it a variable rate, okay, with a 3-year term. So for 1 year, you locked your rate, and so it actually remarketed 2 years ago in 2021, and it was locked at 2%, okay, and so it's due now on August 1st of 2023. So that's what we're here to talk about today. We want to make sure that we give you the options, okay, that are available to you in order to move forward with a refinancing of this 2020 variable rate note. So I passed around a presentation which will basically show you a little bit of what I've already discussed. So as I mentioned, your maintenance tax note in 2023, your interest payment was about $340,000, okay, just to keep that in mind. So if we don't remarket or refinance the maintenance tax note here before August 1st, then there will be a step-up rate up to 7%. Again, you're paying 2% now, going up to 7%. So that's why we're here, all right? So what are the options for the district? You really have 2 options in front of you. It's either refinancing with long-term debt, okay, or actually doing another variable maintenance tax note. So those are really the 2 options that I'm going to talk to you today. So if you look at the next page, with the one with the actual debt, yes, thank you, which is slide number 2. So in this presentation, you currently have 4 maintenance tax notes outstanding, okay? So I just kind of wanted to show you in a chart, and the average annual debt service for all of those 4 are basically roughly about $2.2 million, as you can see in the chart below. And so if you were to actually not refinance, then it would go to 7%, so you'd be paying over $3 million a year, okay? So that's what we want to avoid here. Now, on the next slide, so slide number 3, as I mentioned, there's 2 financing options available at this point. And the first one that we're going to cover is actually refunding and taking out your variable rate tax note and taking that long, okay? And we would do an amortization up to 2040, okay? And so this scenario would assume that you would have roughly about 9-year call feature. So that means that in 9 to 10 years, you might be able to refund it at that time, all right? But you would lock it for about 9, 10 years. So what does that mean at the end of the day in terms of dollars? So the principal and interest of taking out about $17.9 million of notes would basically, it would be a total principal and interest of $24.3 million. That means that your interest expense, okay, for 2024 roughly would be about $771,750. That's taking it out long, okay? Now I'm going to move on to the next scenario. So what if we did a short-term financing vehicle like you did back in 2020? And so right now the current, and I know you, Trustee Acevedo, you asked about the market, so I'm going to get into that a little bit. As you can see, there's also the feasibility of doing a short-term vehicle. So basically you could do very, very similar to what you did in 2020 and actually take it out for 3 to 5 years, okay? And so what is that market today for short-term interest rates? Because everybody knows that for the last year, interest rates have gone up considerably high. And so I did send out an additional spreadsheet right there that I sent out to everybody. And so I kind of want to show you where the market is right now, because you will see, and if I can pull it up myself, you will see the green, sorry about that, I forgot to keep one for myself. Sorry about that. All right, so I think a picture really speaks 1,000 words. And so we'll show you right here that the green line, okay, so what is the green line? That's a SIFMA index, and that's what short-term interest rates basically price at. And so if you went out into the market, this is what we would use to kind of peg your short-term note. And you'll see, look at 2023, and you'll see that how fast the interest rates have gone up in the last year. Now, what I want you to look at is the blue line right there. That is the bond buyer index for general obligation debt, which is over 25 years. And you will see, look at 2023, how close it is to the short-term interest rates. So what that basically tells you is that short-term interest rates are literally at the level of long-term interest rates. So I'm going to go back to the presentation. I'm going to show you what the projected interest rate would be for a short-term, like a 3 to 5 year put, which is what we're talking about today. So projected all-in true interest cost for a 5-year put, it would be 3.86%. Remember, the long-term scenario I just showed you is at 3.90, so it's slightly below going long-term debt. So what does that mean on an annual basis in terms of interest rates? It means that 1-year interest would be at about $670,000 a year. So if you compare those two, you'll see that going on the short-term basis might save the district in terms of debt service per year about $100,000, okay? So that's just what I want to show you, how odd the market is right now and how interesting it is. Now, some of the benefits of actually doing long-term debt, so let's just kind of talk about that. It's you're actually fixing out, you know, over a long time, and then you have your interest rate, and that's basically it. So that's one thing that's super beneficial about doing long-term debt. If you do short-term debt, what it is that you're actually pegging to the short-term interest rate environment. And so it actually, on a DOS collar average basis, it's actually cheaper to go short-term than actually doing long-term. And that is the black line in this presentation that, the charts that I sent over. So I guess the question is, you know, where to go next, right? And so we, in discussions with staff, one of the benefits about the short-term option is that you could literally in 3 years either take it out, refund it again, take it out long. You can do a lot of different things. So that is kind of the best benefit of actually going the short-term version. So in the next slide, which is the recommendation that we will be presenting to your board on June, I believe, at the June 8th meeting, we will be coming to you to present the actual recommendation. Right now, in terms of the discussion that we've had with staff, I feel that they feel that going with the short-term variable rate is the best way to go. So that's going to be the recommendation to your board. Now, in terms of next steps, if approved by your board in the June meeting, then we'll go ahead and actually remarket these notes and close before the August 1st date. So with that, I'm just going to conclude the presentation. I know I gave you a lot of information about numbers, but I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
Is the short-term option callable?
Yes, so so in 3 years, that's when you can actually fully call it, but we're gonna embed 6 months before the 3-year call, so it's really about 2.5 years for the call feature.
Questions?
Board meeting item on it coming up, so
All right, thank you.
thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria. And that concludes our budget workshop.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And we are adjourned at 1:58:07. 50.